क्लास 8 के चैप्टर 2 की रीडिंग आज करेंगे, ठीक है जी। द स्ट्रेंज वॉयज ऑफ सिनबाद। द स्ट्रेंज वॉयज ऑफ सिनबाद। Pre-reading. Sinbad is a fictional sailor and one of the heroes of the Arabian Nights. During his voyages throughout the seas east of Africa and south of Asia, he has fantastic adventures, going to magical places, meeting monsters, and encountering supernatural phenomena. Look at the title and the pictures of the story and try to predict what happens in this voyage of Sinbad. Reading. I had inherited considerable. I had inherited considerable wealth from my parents, but being young and foolish, I wasted it carelessly. Finding that riches speedily take to themselves wings if managed badly, I began to think of how I could make the best of what still remained to me. I sold all my household goods by public auction and joined a company of merchants who traded by sea. Merchants. I obtained goods as were suitable for the places I intended to visit, and embarked in a good ship with other merchants. We went from island to island, often making excellent bargains, until one day we landed at a spot which, though covered with fruit trees and springs of excellent water, appeared to possess neither houses nor people. While my companions wandered here and there, gathering flowers and fruit, I sat down in a shady place, and having heartily enjoyed the provisions I had brought with me, I fell asleep. How long I slept, I do not know, but when I opened my eyes, how long I slept, I do not know, but when I opened my eyes and started to my feet, I perceived with horror that I was alone and that the ship was gone. I ran here and there in despair and found that the ship I sailed in has left the shore. I took courage and looked for means of escape. I climbed a tall tree and looked towards the sea, but finding nothing hopeful there, I climbed a tall tree and looked towards the sea, but finding nothing hopeful there, I turned landward, and my curiosity was excited by a huge, dazzling white object, so far off that I could not make out what it might be. Descending from the tree, I hastily collected what remained of my provisions and set off as fast as I could go towards it. As I drew near it, seemed to me to be a white ball of immense a white ball of immense size and height, and when I touched it, I found it marvelously smooth and soft. Marvelously. As it was impossible to climb it, for it presented no foothold, I walked round about it seeking some opening, but there was none. By this time the sun was near setting, but quite suddenly it fell dark. Something like a huge black cloud came swiftly over me, and I saw with amazement that it was a bird of extraordinary size, which was hovering near. Then I remembered that I had often heard the sailors speak of a wonderful bird called a roc, and it occurred to me that the white object which had so puzzled me must be its egg. And I saw with amazement that it was a bird of extraordinary size which was hovering near. Then I remembered that I had often heard the sailors speak of a wonderful bird called a roc, and it occurred to me that the white object which had so puzzled me must be its egg. Sure enough, the bird settled slowly down upon it, covering it with its wings to keep it warm, and I sat close beside the egg in such a position that one of the bird's feet, which was as large as the trunk of a tree, was just in front of me. Taking off my turban, I tied myself securely to it with the hope that the roc, when it took flight next morning, would bear me away with it from the deserted island. As soon as the dawn appeared, the bird rose into the air, carrying me up and up till I could no longer see the earth. And then suddenly it descended so quickly that I lost consciousness. When I became aware that the roc had settled and that I was once again upon solid ground, I hastily untied my turban from its foot and freed myself. The valley in which I found myself was deep and narrow, and surrounded by mountains which towered into the clouds and were so steep and rocky that there was no way of climbing up their sides. As I wandered about seeking anxiously for some means of escaping from this trap, I observed that the ground was covered with diamonds. This sight gave me great pleasure, but my delight was speedily damped when I saw also numbers of horrible snakes, so long and so large that the smallest of them could have swallowed an elephant with ease. Fortunately for me, they seemed to hide in caves of the rocks by day and only came out by night, probably because of their enemy, the roc. All day long I wandered up and down the valley, and when it grew dusk, I crept into a little cave, and having blocked up the entrance to it with a stone, I ate part of my little store of food and lay down to sleep. But all through the night the serpents crawled to and fro, hissing horribly. In the morning, when the snakes went to their dens, I came tremblingly out of my cave and wandered up and down the valley once more, kicking the diamonds contemptuously out of my path, for I felt that they were indeed vain things to a man in my situation. At last I sat down upon a rock, but I had hardly closed my eyes when I was startled by something which fell to the ground with a thud close beside me. It was a huge piece of fresh meat, and as I stared at it, several more pieces rolled over the cliffs in different places. It was the merchants throwing great lumps of meat into the valley, which fell with so much force upon the diamonds that they stuck to it. When the eagles pounced upon the meat and carried it off to their nests to feed their hungry children, the merchants would scare the eagle away and secure the treasure. I had an idea and I began by picking up all the largest diamonds I could find and storing them carefully in the bag which had held my provisions. This I tied securely to my belt. I then chose the piece of meat which seemed most suited to my purpose, and with the aid of my turban, bound it firmly to my back. This done, I laid down upon my face and awaited the coming of the eagles. I soon heard the flapping of their mighty wings above me, and had the satisfaction of feeling one of them seize upon my piece of meat, and me with it, and rise slowly towards his nest, into which he presently dropped me. Luckily for me, the merchants were on the watch, and setting up their usual outcries, they rushed to the nest, scaring away the eagle. Their amazement was great when they discovered me. I made a deal with them by showing them the diamonds I had brought from the valley. The merchants agreed to take me along. I stayed with them several days, and then, as they were journeying homewards, I gladly accompanied them. Before we left, I exchanged one of my diamonds for much goodly merchandise, by which I profited greatly on our homeward way. At last I reached home, where my first action was to bestow large sums of money upon the poor, after which I settled down to enjoy tranquilly the riches I had gained with so much toil and pain.